Welcome back to the CRP podcast. I'm Miguel, and it is Saturday night, March 23rd. The UFC Tennessee's offering, the UFC in Nashville, is in the books. And I'm joined by my MMA partner, Devin Miller, to talk a little bit about the fallout from the main event fights. Now, obviously, the main event, the feature fight, came in the welterweight division, pitting a couple of strikers together, Anthony Pettis, Stephen Thompson. Thompson a favorite, almost by 5-1 at the start of the week. Some money came in on Pettis, but not too much. Thompson seems to be doing well in the first round, and then Pettis struck as round 2 closed. Devin, how'd you read that? Because, that sends some shockwaves through the welterweight division.
Well, it sent some shockwaves into my living room also, because we all were up on our feet as soon as it happened, because it came out of nowhere. And we're sitting here watching the fight, and it was playing out pretty much exactly like I thought it was going to. I didn't think Anthony was going to be able to go strike for strike with Wonderboy Thompson. Wonderboy Thompson is very crafty, and he's very hard to put a combination against, and he'll get you kind of mesmerized in your stance, and it's really hard to pull the trigger on him, and he'll just pick you apart. And he was landing a lot of those left straights and had Anthony busted up. And I mean, we were sitting here talking about just the same thing I was talking about about on our weight trade picks, about just what Anthony's done. I mean, no matter what happens to him, nobody can take him away from him being the only WEC and UFC champion besides Jose Aldo, I guess. But being the first MMA fighter on the cover of the Wheaties box, and what more is he going to have in the tank after this? And, what more motivation does he have to keep fighting when he's losing so many fights, and then just bam, out of nowhere, he saves his whole career. And now just maybe pulled off one of the best highlights besides the kick off the cage that he's ever had, just out of nowhere. And just being a top 5 guy at welterweight in a division he's never fought at. So it's pretty crazy. Big win for him. He's still 4-6 in his last 10 fights. So, but he's saying the weight cut was hard, and he looked good at welterweight. He was pressing forward, and he had a great fight with Tony Ferguson and a great fight with Michael Chiesa. So this is very damaging to Stephen Thompson, who came in ranked as the number 3 contender. He's now 3-4 and 1-3 in his last 4 fights. But they have been murderers row, and like we were talking about on the weight trade, the first Woodley fight he would have won had he not been dropped in that 4th round, because that's what made it a draw. He won 3 of those rounds. The second Woodley fight, a lot of people thought he won. A lot of people think he won the Darren Till fight. There's no questioning who won tonight, though. He was put to sleep. So this is a hard loss for Stephen Thompson, being 36 years old at this point.
Yep, and, as you said, Pettis sort of saving his career, saving the day. And one of the interesting things, today, obviously, fight day, a lot of news hitting across the internet. Somewhere, somebody tweeted, and I don't want to take credit for it, but that Showtime kick was 2010. So we're talking about 9 years ago that we've had Anthony Pettis, in our minds and at the top of the game. And this sort of was, a return kind of to the glory days kind of thing. We'll see how they follow up with him. Stephen Thompson's going to need a little bit of rest, obviously, but Pettis puts himself in the mix. He'll probably get a top 10 ranking at this point, don't you think? I don't think they can crack him into the top 5.
I think that's likely. I think they're going to have to rank him in the top 10, but I think this is very good news for some of these new contenders. Namely, you got Jorge Masvidal at welterweight. This is such a great division. You got Masvidal and guys like Santiago Ponzinibbio and Leon Edwards, and some of these guys that are right in there in that division, and they're going to all move up because Wonderboy Thompson's going to fall. But how do you put Anthony Pettis above guys like Ponzinibbio and Leon Edwards, who are on 7-fight win streaks in this division? How do you put him ahead of them off of one win, even though it was against Wonderboy Thompson? Those rankings are just sometimes so confusing, but in my opinion, he should be ranked for sure and high, because Wonderboy was definitely a top 5 welterweight coming in, it was crazy they even matched this fight up with Anthony being 3-6 in his last 9 fights at featherweight, at not only lightweight, which is really his home weight, but also featherweight. He tried this little rendezvous down at featherweight where he pulled a win against Charles Oliveira down there, and then they just immediately pushed him into an interim title fight with Max Holloway, and he was completely outclassed in that fight. And he really never pulled together a big string of wins up at lightweight either. He's been, ever since he lost the belt to Javier Dos Anjos, he's not been pulling together wins. And for them to move him up to welterweight against the top 5 welterweight seemed like a mismatch, especially a guy that he's just tailor-made for somebody like Wonder Boy to chew up and eat alive for 5 rounds. But he shut the lights out. So this is just why we love MMA, because you really never know what's going to happen.
And that's what we got in the main event of the UFC Nashville. Heading on down the card, the heavyweights. We can use the word methodical here for Curtis Blaydes' unanimous decision win over Justin Willis. Blaydes dominating where the fight was going to happen in terms of being able to drag Willis to the floor throughout the fight, more or less. Not a lot of damage piling up there, but definitely a dominant performance by Blaydes. 30-25 on one of the judges' cards. That's 2 10-8 rounds. So not much to say here. Blaydes keeps his top 5 ranking. He's asking for one of the other top guys. I'm not sure if I saw enough, of a jump from Blaydes to move him into the championship contention. How do you see this one?
I'm trying to remember who the 3 that he called out that he said that he would want next. I know he said Dos Santos,
Stipe,
Stipe, and I know he didn't call out Ngannou, who's beat him twice, and Daniel Cormier, which I thought that was respectful on the microphone with Daniel Cormier, not to talk about a title shot after he just lost another fight to Ngannou. But when I look at this fight, I mean, just like what we talked about in the wage rate, this one was a really hard one to pick because we've seen Justin Willis 4 times in the UFC, and he was 4-0 and coming in, but we really hadn't seen him tested. We really didn't know. There wasn't a lot of things answered with Justin Willis yet. Well, all that was really answered tonight. He can't wrestle, and he's not going to be able to wrestle against a guy like Stipe or a guy like, even if Brock Lesnar came back, or Daniel Cormier or Curtis Blaydes or some of these top level wrestling guys. And he talked to a lot of people are criticizing Blaydes in his antics after the fight toward Willis, but Willis really did talk a pretty big game, and it came back to bite him. But Blaydes answered every question I had about Justin Willis at this point. He's years away from being a serious contender in this division. And Blaydes now is 6-2 inside the octagon since he's been with the UFC. And he has good wins over guys like Alexei Olenek and Mark Hunt, and he knocked out Alistair Overeem on the ground with really brutal elbows, and now he just ragdolled Justin Willis for 3 rounds. But he has those 2 knockout losses to Francis Ngannou that are really hampering his potential at this division, because I think Ngannou is a top prospect at heavyweight, and it, God forbid, for Blaydes' sake, Ngannou ever becomes champion, it's going to be a really hard sell to say, oh, let's put Blaydes in there a 3rd time with him when he didn't make it a minute in the rematch after being knocked out in the 2nd round in their first fight. So it puts Blaydes in an awkward spot.
Yep, all Blaydes can do is just keep winning, I guess, moving on down the card here, we had John Makdessi facing Jesus Pinedo. Pinedo out of Peru. Kind of tall and awkward, but Makdessi kept the distance and just was content to point fight. Not a super exciting fight. Pinedo pressed the action a little bit throughout a couple of minutes throughout the fight, but other than that, he just let Makdessi pile up the points. How did you see this one?
Well, that's kind of what I thought. Pinedo, I think is going to be a good fighter. I think he's going to be around a while, but he's still very young, early 20s. And Makdessi, I think, is finally starting to really get his groove and figure out his fighting style, even though it's not as exciting as some of his earlier fights were. But he's pulled together a 3-fight win streak now, and they've all been by decisions. And I think that he is realizing that he's a very diverse striker that is very hard to take down. And if you learn how to pull together wins and not, take unnecessary damage and unnecessary chances, you can have a long career. You can pull together some wins and not be at the hands of some of these surprising knockouts. And he's been around in the UFC. I mentioned this on the Wage Rage too since 2010, and he now has something like a 9-5 UFC record. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I need to calculate it, but I know that he's won four of his last 5, and he's on the 3-5 win streak. I've always thought he's a very good fighter. I think he's an underachiever. He's only 33 years old, and I think that I'm happy to see him doing pretty good, and I'm interested in seeing his next fight because he's always been a very good fighter. But I remember it's sad to me that I remember the two biggest memories I have of John Makdessi, who's a really good fighter, been around a long time, almost 10 years inside the UFC, is Donald Cerrone breaking his jaw with a head kick and Lando Venata knocking him out with that spinning kick. So it's sad that those are the two biggest memories I have when I think of John Makdessi, but he's a good fighter though.
And we walked out of Nashville with a third win in a row, and so he continues to move on up there a little bit. Now, in the flyweight division, you got Jussier Silva taking on Deiveson Figueiredo. Silva, smart enough and experienced enough to win a pretty comfortable unanimous decision. He went on to call out Henry Cejudo, hoping, I guess, to save the flyweight division. Figueiredo still young and kind of look big, so he'll probably be able to operate a bantamweight, but Silva really doing the work here, trying to keep the flyweights alive.
Yeah, I've seen with Figueiredo the same issues that I've seen when he fought Jared Brooks, who is a local Indiana boy from Warsaw, earlier in his UFC career, where he doesn't have the best wrestling, but man, is he ferocious on the feet. I mean, you can tell that man has some power for a flyweight. But Formiga was the better, stronger grappler in this fight, and I definitely think that Jussier Formiga is for sure the number one contender at flyweight. But him calling out Cejudo after a decision win, even if it was impressive, even if he just got off a win, just pulled off a win against Sergio Pettis in his fight previous, and is on a pretty good streak and has a split decision fight, lost to Cejudo in the past, so it would be a rematch. I think we're going to get the Cejudo Moraes fight, and I think that's going to be the determining factor of what goes on next with this division. Unfortunately, I don't think they should cut this division. I think these fighters are good. I think there's, some really good fighters here, but I would like to see Cejudo and Formiga, but I think that he's probably looking at Benavidez next. And go ahead.
Well, I would like to see, them keep the division as well, and I think, he did run the risk of taking a loss, and they can move the other kid up, and then maybe there's the attrition, even though he's been on a winning streak, of one less guy in the division if they're heading that way. So he may very well have saved his job with that win. And, I don't know if I'd be calling for him to see Cejudo either, but Cejudo on his way to bantamweight, we may never see him at 125 again. Anyway, heading on down the card, we had Luis Pena and Steven Peterson. Pena, the unorthodox, tall, 6'3" fighter for this weight class. Peterson, gritty and a grinder, and this one went Pena's way by unanimous decision. What did you think of Pena's performance?
I mean, he pulled it together. This is his first win after coming off since the Ultimate Fighter season 27 finale. He lost a split decision to Mike Trezano, which was a very good fight. And I like Luis Pena. I think he's a good fighter. He's young, only 25. I guess I would have watched a different fight because I thought this was a very close fight. Steven Peterson was definitely pressing forward very well, and Pena definitely landed the sharper shots. I'm not so sold that I believe in a 6'3" frame at 145 pounds. He looks and he looks really bad at weigh-ins. And I think more weight would do him. I think it would do him a favor, not be counterproductive. I think that he would have more power in his punches. I think he'd be stronger. I would actually, for only a 25-year-old who's just beginning his UFC run, only 2-1 inside the octagon now, I would like to see Luis Pena put on some weight and go up a weight class. He's 6'3", and so he's going to be big even at lightweight. And he could potentially, by the time he's 30, he could be up at welterweight. So I would like to see him move up from here. That 6'3" frame at 145 pounds, he seems a little too thin for me.
Yeah, it may have shown there, and I mean, he has some unorthodox techniques that he could use against the smaller guys there, but there's room to grow. We were talking earlier this week about Luke Rockhold. How big is Luke Rockhold? How tall is he?
He's 6'3".
And we talked about him being a huge middleweight. So, now back-to-back, Rockhold may be taller than Luis Pena, but they list at the same height, and that's the kind of disparity that you're looking at. At some point, it is, the weight drain is a problem for some people. Now, the opening fight of the main card here was one that a lot of people were looking forward to in the ladies division at flyweight, and it featured Maycee Barber taking on J.J. Aldridge, and Barber getting a lot of attention. She was on the cover of CNN's website, as a UFC fighter of the future, and kind of links, in a couple of days before the big fight kind of thing. She was getting the media hype rolling behind her. Do you think she backed it up? How'd she look?
Well, I think the key thing to remember here is that she is 20 years old. I mean, she's so young. And I do think that this is the second biggest story of the night other than Pettis' knockout is Maycee Barber, because I do think we're looking at somebody who's going to be around for a long time. And I really enjoyed her post-fight interview where she was talking about what her corner said that she was doing wrong, that she knows she's got to improve on moving forward. And that's that she was throwing kicks without punches in front of them. And J.J. Aldrich was making her pay the price at the beginning. She was landing some shots, even kind of rattled Maycee at the beginning. Maycee did seem to make the adjustments. Yeah, dropped her and was kind of popping her with those shots. Maycee ate them well. She didn't lose her composure, and she is so physical once it hits the pitch. That girl throws elbows in the clinch about as good as anybody in the sport already. I mean, she just tears people up in the clinch with those elbows. They just immediately back off now. They know to expect that. So it's just like kind of when Anderson Silva was just eating people up. Rich Franklin, in particular, from the tie clinch, people stopped playing the clinch game with Anderson Silva. And I think that's what's going to end up happening with Maycee Barber. People aren't going to want to clinch up with her too much because she's so good at untying the clinch and turning over elbows onto people. But J.J. Aldrich was playing more of a boxing-heavy style, and we did see some flaws with Maycee Barber, but she does have her chin up. She kind of has like a herky-jerky, reminds me kind of old Keith Jardine style with kind of her hands wide and chin straight up in the air getting popped. But it actually turned out to be what led to the finish, because she ended up reading that jab that she kept getting hit with and countered with a left hand, because JJ was kind of throwing him a little too lazy and not snapping them back quick enough. And the power that 20-year-old, for a 20-year-old, 125-pound girl, she's a freaking powerhouse. And she cracked JJ, and then the finish was beautiful. I mean, she just overwhelmed her with power, and that's what I keep seeing out of her, is this physicality and brutal power, a diverse set of techniques. I think it needs polished, but she's 20 years old, so I hope they take her slow. But where she could be in just 2 or 3 years, she wants to break John Jones' record as the youngest champion. You sent me a text message, and I agree with you that I don't think Shevchenko's worried yet. But Shevchenko's in her prime of her career. Maycee Barber, I can only imagine what she's going to be when she's 30.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of good things to take note, and especially in the first round where she did face adversity. Let's face it, she came out and she looked sloppy. She didn't look like a UFC fighter because she has, like you said, that herky-jerky style. And, you know, if you're Roy Jones Jr., that sort of thing worked for you. But when you get hit and you get dropped on your ass in one of the opening exchanges, it all starts to come out the window. She handled that great. Because she got up and when she went back to, you know, she survived or got through the round. When she went back to her corner, she asked, as you pointed out, great corner work. She was totally in the fight. She said, I need to be more active. And then her corner kind of pinpointed exactly what it was she needed to do. And she was listening. She was coherent. She wanted, and she came out and executed her game plan. They knew what they wanted to do. And those are called making adjustments. That's the type of thing that you get to make in a fight. Aldridge came out with the same game plan that she did in game one, in round one rather, and you know, that wasn't going to work for her anymore. That shows sophistication, and as you said, when you tie it back down to a 20-year-old fighter and that sort of stuff, you got to keep an eye on it. I still, like I said, Shevchenko, there's a level there at 125, and Maycee Barber, you know, showed a lot of good things in the fight too. So I wanted to, but let's put up a caution because, you know, Conor McGregor put in some work in the UFC, and Ronda Rousey had a different path that was all her own and stuff. But, you know, she's going to have to go the Conor route, I think. She's going to, at some point, have to meet some of the tougher people in that division and walk into some fights as an underdog and pull them out.
Yeah, I think I got an idea. I don't know if it should be next. I would welcome it if it was next. But I think I know the perfect fight at this division for her right now, and that's against Paige Van Zandt. That's a perfect fight, dude. That's a great fight. Paige Van Zandt is not a threatening chick. She's good everywhere. She's not great anywhere. She can grapple. She can strike a little bit. She's a beautiful face. Everybody knows who she is. Maycee Barber, somebody they're definitely trying to groom and promote. Paige Van Zandt was a journeyman at 115 pounds, has moved up to flyweight, and she's getting older, she's getting bigger, she's getting better. I think that that's a great fight right now, and I want to see. I don't know if that should happen exactly next, but that's the fight that I would go with because it will give some name value for Maycee Barber to compete against. Because let's face it, right now, when what we've seen with Paige Van Zandt and what we're seeing with a 20-year-old Maycee Barber, I think we're going to see. I think Maycee Barber legitimately could be a world champion. I don't feel that way about Paige Van Zandt. Nothing against her. I think she's beautiful. I think she's an interesting woman. I have nothing wrong with her as a person. I don't think she's going to be a world champion in the UFC. I don't think she'll ever be somebody that's going to be a legitimate contender against Valentina Shevchenko. Maycee Barber, on the other hand, in 2, 3, 5 years, definitely could be a legitimate world-class fighter. But I think that's an interesting fight for her. But I think she does definitely need to take. And I think they're going to do that. I think they're not going to rush her too fast. The thing is, this division's wide open. They got Jessica Ai fighting Shevchenko next. Jessica Ai went on a 4-fight losing streak at bantamweight at one point. I'm still not sure if she doesn't have a losing record in the UFC. She's 500. This is definitely a wide open division that they're going to start grooming faces and talent for. She would get completely destroyed by Shevchenko right now, but who isn't at this division? So I mean, I hope that they have they don't try to rush. Oh, well, let's just get her 3 or 4 good wins together and then just throw her in there with Shevchenko. Because what's going to end up happening is it's just going to be one of those, oh, well, that was like Ngannou versus Stipe when they fought. Like, oh, well, she wasn't ready for that. But the thing that keeps me so hyped with this girl is this is her 7th career professional fight at 20 years old. And she's main carding a UFC fight night, and she's backing them up. She's backing them up with 2nd-round finishes in her first 2 UFC fights. So, I think she's well spoken, and I'm excited to see where her career goes. She's still who I'm the most excited out of all the women to see compete because I think we're going to see something blossom here with Maycee Barber.
And we are targeting the immediate aftermath of the UFC's Nashville appearance. March 23rd saw the UFC hit the Tennessee town with a huge fight night headlined by Anthony Showtime Pettis' knockout win over Stephen Thompson.